Hey everyone, I just wanted to pop on here and give you guys a full update on Belle. I'm doing it out here in the pasture and Belle's just hanging out there. We've also got Annie. And I just thought I'd give you guys a full story and update on what happened to Belle, how she got sick, the whole story. I wasn't really able to share exactly all the details at the time. It was way too emotional and hard for me when it was really uncertain whether Belle would live or not. But it's much easier now that she's here with me at home and she's on the right track and continuing to improve. As she comes over and says hi. Hi, sweetheart. Okay, so it was Wednesday that she first started getting sick. That morning she looked totally fine, had eaten her breakfast great, and I took her out. It was fitness day, and I took her out for her fitness day. We did a 15-minute walk warm-up and then a 15-minute trot, and then we did 3 sets of 6s. So canter for 6 minutes, 2-minute break, canter for 6 minutes, 2-minute break, canter for 6 minutes. Again, she's eating there. And she felt fantastic. She was lively, energetic, having a great time, being her good, normal, silly self for most of it. Then at the very end of the last 6-minute set, I know how she canters, I know how she feels, and there's maybe like 1 or 2 minutes left in the set. And she just all of a sudden just kind of changed her canter where she just kind of felt a little luggy. Nothing terrible, she just changed. And it was like a light bulb moment. I just remember it. She just all of a sudden and not lame, not that kind of, but just kind of luggy. Like she normally canters very uphill, and she all of a sudden just kind of wanted to hang her head a little bit and just didn't feel very energetic. But she was still very willing to go. Like if I put my leg on, she sped up. Like it wasn't anything like that. She just didn't feel totally normal. And I was like, okay, well, I'm sure she's just a little tired, and it's a little warm this morning, and you know, it's at the end of the ride, whatever. And then on the way home, the walk home from the canter set in our cool out, she normally marches home. She normally gets right on it and marches home. And again, she just felt a little sluggish. Nothing terrible. Like I wasn't having to urge her on or anything. I wasn't having to push her. She just wasn't as active and lively as she normally is. And so it was a bit weird. Got home, made sure I cooled her out really well, bathed her. And then I also ice her after a big workout like that. So I was icing her, and she was just acting like she was almost drugged. She was just kind of standing there, kind of hanging her head, not acting painful whatsoever. She pooped once. It was a total normal, maybe like a little bit on the soft side, which is not uncommon for her after a really extreme workout, but it was still really good form. And so, but she was just kind of hanging her head and just acting not quite like herself. And so I went ahead and temped her, totally normal temp. So I know that she wasn't overheated. And so I went ahead and put her out in the pasture. And as soon as I went and put her out in the pasture, she went and laid down. And I'm like, okay, that's not normal behavior for her. She hadn't gotten to be out in the pasture for a couple days due to weather. And so when that normally happens when she goes out, like she immediately is wanting to eat. And that was not the case today. And she was, as you can see, she's a good eater. And she enjoys eating. She just went and lay down. She wasn't rolling, she wasn't acting painful, but she laid down, which I immediately knew was just not in her behavior. And so I texted my vet, said, hey, Belle's acting a little odd, listed kind of things she was doing. And then I had a lesson to teach, and thankfully, like where Belle's pasture is actually kind of surrounds my arena. And so I was able to keep an eye on her while I taught this lesson. I went ahead and got her electrolytes. I did go out and give her that. Kind of in the middle of my lesson, and then went back to it. Kept an eye on her. She wasn't appearing painful, but was laying down. At one point she got up, went and got water, went and laid back down again. Finished up the lesson. And I went and checked on her again. She's still just kind of hanging out, laying down. At that point, my vet was able to call me back because she was in a meeting when I had originally contacted her. We talked about what was going on. She recommended I go ahead and give the horse Banamine to see if that helped relieve any of her symptoms. And so I went ahead and gave her a dose of Banamine. And she definitely seemed to perk up after that within about a half an hour, which is the timing of the Banamine working. She was up and kind of moseying around. So I just kept an eye on her. Her appetite wasn't super strong, but she was kind of munching here and there, and just kept an eye on her. And that evening when I brought her in, I saw her take a drink. Oop. Saw her take a drink. I even saw her munch on some of the hay we'd just given her. And talked to my vet. So okay, whatever it must have been, kind of passed. That's it. The next morning I woke up and I could see her right out of my window. And she was laying down, which is really uncommon. I know when she lays down, she actually likes to lay down a lot. Belle really enjoys her sleep time. But I know when she lays down, I know where she lays down, and she was laying down. So immediately my brain's triggering, something's not right. And so I went out there, I temped her, perfectly normal temp, several normal poos overnight. She wasn't acting painful. And so I was like, okay, this is not colic, but this is something. I don't know what's going on, but something is going on. And so I went ahead and contacted my vet again, saying something's not right. I don't know if we need to do blood work. Because honestly, she didn't look terrible. She didn't look terrible. She just wasn't quite right. And so also another thing she hadn't done is she gets soaked alfalfa pellets overnight, and she'd barely touched that. So she wasn't really eating, and she was just a little lethargic. Those were her main symptoms, but she wasn't breathing hard. She wasn't acting painful. She didn't have a temperature. So I called my vet, and she was able to come out around 12 in the afternoon. And she came out, and during that time, most of the time, Belle was just laying down, or she was just kind of hanging out in her shed. I brought her out to see if she'd want to eat grass. She didn't want to eat her favorite grass. So she just looked down. She just wanted to, if she was standing, she would just stand there hanging her head, depressed looking, and just, but not painful. It was a hard one. So my vet came out, and she temped her, and at that point she finally had spiked a temperature. Not huge, it was like a 101.7, but definitely a temperature. And I even at that point went ahead and got my thermometer out, because I was worried that maybe my thermometer wasn't working this whole time, and maybe she had a temperature and I wasn't aware of it. And so I temped her again with my thermometer, and sure enough, it did show that she was having a fever. It showed the same number. So it had just happened within the last couple of hours. And the other things is she had extremely high rate, heart rate, and some little bit of abnormal gut sounds, maybe a little overactive, and her lungs just sound a little funky. And she was just like, I don't know what's going on, but this is definitely not something we can deal with out in the field, in the sense of she needed way more diagnostics to figure out what was going on. She goes, this is not normal. This is not, something's not right, but I don't have the tools to figure it out here in the field. We need to get an abdominal ultrasound, and she didn't have the tools to do that. And so she recommended that we go to CSU Vet Hospital, and I agreed. And so she made the call to the vets there to let them know that I was on my way. And immediately I loaded up and headed out. Got to CSU. I'm very lucky that it's only about a 15-minute drive for me to get there. And I got there, unloaded her. Because of the fact she had spiked a fever, they have a very strict protocol there that anytime a horse has a fever, if it comes into their area, onto their facility there, it has to immediately be quarantined to make sure that whatever they have is not infectious. So unfortunately, I was not able to be there for any of the diagnostics. They immediately took her away and brought her into a secluded area. And that's just the way their protocol works. And so I had to go with it. I stuck around at the vet hospital because I was really hoping, because honestly, she didn't look that bad clinically. The girls are having another little fun little bout. She didn't look that extreme, right? So I was really hoping that they would be able to do some diagnostics, figure out what's going on, maybe give her some meds, and then be able to send her home. That was my hope, what was going to happen. That was not what happened. After a couple hours of me waiting, they came out to tell me that Belle was very sick. Still gonna have a hard time, even though she's right here with me. Yeah, sweetheart, good girl. That she was extremely sick. They didn't know the cause, but she had endotoxemia. I mean, she had endotoxins in her system, which that in itself can cause laminitis, shock, death. She also had, I'm forgetting the word this very second, but it means swelling of the small intestine. They didn't know what was causing these two things, but both these things on their own are extremely dangerous and can both be deadly and also cause a lot of extreme problems. They also said her blood work was really terrible. Her white cell count was extremely low, as was her protein levels. And at that point, they told me that her prognosis was extremely guarded because of the fact there could be so many complications, one of them being death. So I had to go home with an empty trailer, which as a animal owner, that's all our fear, right? Always that sense of going home without your animal is always really hard. Even when you know that your animal's in the best place that it can be for what it needs, it's still not an easy thing. Made the drive home. They called me later that night, talking more about the plan and how she was doing. They were concerned because she was wanting to lay down quite a bit, and they were concerned. They asked for my permission if she got even worse, if they could do surgery. They were worried that possibly she had dead bowel in there that they had not seen in their imaging. And I did give them the permission, but I wanted to be called first to be able to talk through it. They also mentioned that really the only course of treatment at the time was to get her hydrated. Even if they knew what the exact cause of what was going on, antibiotics is not a good option because it disrupts the gut even more, and typically it worsens the symptoms instead of helping it. It's just a hard thing. And you'll have to excuse me. I'm not a vet. If you don't quite understand what I'm saying, either Google it, or if I get it a little wrong, you're gonna have to excuse me, because again, this was my perception of what was going on and the information that they were giving me. And so the biggest thing is we just had to treat her with fluids, and that was the only thing they could really do for her. They were also icing her to try to keep laminitis from not happening, and so she had ice boots on. I think it was like 2 hours on, 2 hours off for quite a while. Thankfully, I did not get a call that night requesting to do surgery. They called me in the morning to let me know that she was still alive, basically. And at that point, her levels were holding steady. They weren't improving, but they were holding steady, which was a positive sign. So hold steady, and that was Friday, because she went in Thursday. Holding steady on Friday, called me Saturday, again holding steady. But in the afternoon, they called me saying that her labs were actually declining. Her proteins were going down, and her white cell blood count was not improving. And so that was quite discouraging at that time. And I was also not able to go see her at all. Their protocol is extreme to keep any kind of infection from spreading. They don't allow the owners to be able to interact with the horse. And I understand, like, it's hard, and I get it. They've got to do what they've got to do to keep their facility safe. But it was really hard because I know for my heart and for Belle, it would have been nice if we could have gotten to see each other and even just touch. I did go see her, but I only could see her through a glass. And so it was good at least to see her. She was up and she was eating. Clinically, she was looking pretty good, but still her labs were quite terrible. And so that was Saturday. Sunday, we finally got some good news that she was starting to improve, starting to come around the corner, at least with her proteins. Her white blood cell count was still low, but the proteins were better. And they were quite happy that she was clinically looking good. She was eating. And so all those things were really good signs. Monday, again, still slight improvement. And then on Tuesday, her white blood cell count finally came up enough that they felt like it was safe for her to come home, which was huge. And so I went and got to pick her up. The one thing, they'd been testing her. They sent off a bunch of tests to UC Davis to see if they could figure out what was causing this. Coronavirus was one of the things, a bunch of other infectious stuff. The only thing she ended up testing positive for was salmonella. The problem with salmonella is most horses carry it. And in times of stress or sickness, they'll actually shed it. So it's not quite known if that's actually what caused her problems to begin with, or it exacerbated the problems, or if it was just simply she was shedding it because of the fact she was sick and stressed. So that was the only thing she tested positive for. She'd already started testing negative for it by the time she was coming home. So brought her home. We kept her isolated and she was now on a drug to help increase blood flow to her intestines, to help heal it, to help her absorb the nutrition that she's getting, her proteins. And so she's just been on that and hanging out. Several days later, we did a series of days of testing in a row, 4 days in a row of testing for salmonella, and they all came back negative, which was great. And just a couple days ago, she finally got the all clear from the vets to be able to return to being able to hang out with her friends, which I think is going to be a really big improvement for her, because she was doing okay on her own. She could still see horses, but she definitely loves her friends just like any horse does. And so I think that's going to be really big for her improvement and her continued health, hopefully. So her proteins, they got checked again yesterday. They're still improving. They're still on the low side. We're at 5.1 right now. Normal range for horses is 6 to 8. So we're hoping to get her up into that normal range. But yeah, so unfortunately we don't really know, besides her testing positive for salmonella. She didn't test positive for anything else. So we don't know what caused the initial flare up, which is kind of terrifying, because when you don't know what it was, how can you prevent it? Which is hard, because it came on so fast. And quite honestly, she didn't look that sick until we took her to the hospital. Until then, she didn't even have a fever. The only signs is that she was just a little lethargic and not eating as well. And it's scary, but I'm just so thankful she's home and she's back, and she gets to be back hanging out with her friends, which just does my heart so good. She won't be allowed to do any kind of extra exercise say that a few times fast, until her proteins come fully up. And so that's one big thing that we're waiting for. She's going to continue being on this drug that helps bring that blood flow to her intestines to continue healing that. And so hopefully when that's fully healed, she'll be able to absorb everything she needs to, and she'll be back to normal. That's the hope. So we're about a month out now from when it first happened. So I'm hoping maybe in a week or two, we might be able to get back to some work. So yeah, so that's the big long story. Thanks for sticking in with me. Again, I'm sorry if I got any of the details wrong about the medical stuff. I was extremely lucky and fortunate to have such a great team at CSU, and also in connection with my vet here, Dr. Laura Thompson. They did a great job of continuing to communicate to each other, and I was very lucky, and they also outsourced talking to other vets to see what was going on. I was very fortunate to have such a great team behind her. I also was super lucky while she was in the hospital. I happened to know some people that work in the hospital, and they were able to kind of give me little updates, letting me know that she was still doing good, because I only heard official updates 2 times a day from the vet. And when your horse is sick and possibly dying, 2 times a day is just really not enough, because you want to be there. You want to be with them every second of it, you know, like as if you're with a loved one in a hospital bed. You want to be sitting right next to them and knowing every second of every day what's going on. So I was lucky to get some little extra insight. So I just want to tell you, everybody's so thankful for all of your love and support during this really hard time. It's always so hard when our animals are sick. They have such a huge, deep part of our hearts. And I really appreciate everybody coming out and supporting me. I can't tell you how much that means to me and Belle. And I really hope that we will be on track soon and be out doing what we love, which is eventing. And I hope that we can be out doing it and having all of you guys cheering us on to the future. Thank you, guys.